Welcome, Eon God, who is the first comment in my stream about mental illness being caused by cognitive dissonance. He disagrees and says he prefers the idea that mental diversity is a result of cognitive resonance. I would agree with him there that obviously we don't want to all think alike because we are afraid of thinking differently because of the consequences of so doing. But we know that once upon a time, if you were born in a Christian kingdom, you were expected to follow the religion of your absolute monarch. And if you had any ideas of your own, you would be accused of blasphemy. And if you refused to question the divinity of Jesus, you would be burnt at the stake for blasphemy as a heretic. So this kind of conditioning has, I would say, divided the European mind. So over the centuries, they must have worked out that you could achieve a measure of success if you did not question the religion of your king. And so you kind of quarantined the idea of questioning the religion of your monarch into a little corner of your mind, and then you would think that anyone who chooses to do so must be mad or evil or stupid and deserved exactly what they got. That, I imagine, is how people who want to rationalize this strange situation of being expected to believe in absurdities would do. That theirs is not to question why, but just to live in their land of birth and do the best that they can without being burnt at the stake for questioning the Trinity. And so you would say, smart people would operate that way. It's like, well, if I question the Trinity, I'm going to be burnt at the stake. So better not die horribly or disgrace my family. Better be an obedient servant of the king and achieve worldly success that way. But not everybody thought like that. Some people who did really believe in God wondered if he really was Jesus and couldn't wait to find out. And so they carried on saying again and again, or asking again and again, how Christianity is not idolatry and how Jesus is God. I would call them the proto-Muslims of Europe, and they should be posthumously regarded as Europe's first proto-Muslims who were martyrs to their correct belief that God is not Jesus, and who did it on their own before the Muslims arrived, before the whole system became semi-respectable and even logical to question the divinity of Jesus. So we know that your God is not a believer. He trolls. He trolls the Christians who drive themselves mad trying to believe in the absurdity organized by Paul van der Clay and his Estuary Protocols. I know that Jacob Farturecci does not agree with the Estuary Protocols. I'm not quite sure why, but it seems to me that adult men do not need the permission of Paul van der Clay to discuss whatever the hell it is that they want. I have also noticed that Luke Thompson, who has a big channel, has absolutely refused to discuss Nick Fuentes on Tucker Carlson, even though in the chat of his recent live stream requesting that this be discussed, it was pretty, what's the word? Pretty vocal and general, the desire to discuss Nick Fuentes and his views on Zionism on the Tucker Carlson show. But Paul van der Clay is known for giving it to people good and hard if they want to discuss certain things that he doesn't think should be discussed. And I've seen it done more than once to people. I think the most recent victim of that was this Kenyan wife of this British man. I think they live in Nairobi. I've had it done to me when I wanted to question the wisdom of not treating unmarried parents as sex offenders. And the response I got from Paul van der Clay, who has blocked me, by the way, was, "We're not the kind of people who discuss this sort of thing." So, who are the kind of people that Paul van der Clay represents? Who are they? I would say they are confused white men wanting to hold on to their middle class identity, who have this idea that being middle class meant going to church and holding vaguely sensible ideas and doing vaguely sensible things. What are estuary protocols? I've been to one. I've been to one of those meetings, and it's basically you are divided into groups, and then everybody is supposed to tell their life story, and then receive polite validation from members of that group, and then they can propose a subject that the group might discuss, and that subject might not be allowed. Paul van der Clay might decide that the topic would be inappropriate, and those people there are not the kind of people who want to discuss that kind of thing. So, I guess, no, I don't guess. I think I have pretty much concluded that his thought policing and subject policing and tone policing of people generally white, middle class, and angry and confused about politics, into not discussing things on the topmost of their mind, and probably increasing their mental illness, because of all the women there who would be upset about the topics that men are concerned about. So it's a great idea of being, on the one hand, sociable and female friendly, and on the other hand, just there to drive the men mad. I detect two strands in the estuary protocol movement, and it's basically the women and the Luke Thompson types who want to carry on turning these groups into into playgrounds for infantilized men and women, to be nannied by these women, and to continue frustrating the men who really want to use these protocol group, these estuary groups into as political parties promoting Christian nationalism. This is what I detect. But how are they going to get anywhere when I think the real purpose of it is to keep men down, to stop them from discussing exactly what's on their minds. And the thing is, why don't they just talk about it? Why don't they just find somebody outside this ideologically restricted group? Paul van der Klee actually admits his democratic. Well, he admits that he's a Democrat, doesn't he? He has said that he has some kind of ancestral tradition of being a Democrat, and therefore he's not MAGA. So the purpose of this group for men is to keep them down and keep them infantilized, and keep them hoping that one day perhaps pretty Luke Thompson might one day allow a serious political subject to be discussed, like the one about Nick Fuentes saying what he did on Tucker Carlson. But they would hope in vain, because the whole point of the Estuary Protocols is to keep these men infantilized and nannified by the women who basically will just talk about their emotions to a nauseating degree, and probably make the men just hate themselves for putting up with it. What is in it for the men? For the men, it would be, well, just sort of friendly validation, the sort you might get in group therapy. Understanding and well, people not being too rude about you and your ideas. But that would mean not doing what they really want to do, which is to say what's on their mind. And, if they really wanted to say what's on their mind, they should just go forth and risk themselves being shot down. Not literally, since this is only the internet. They could just go forth and say, well, I want to discuss ICE, I want to discuss immigration, I want to discuss Christian nationalism. But to be fair to Paul van der Klee, he does talk about it, but he talks about it in a disapproving way, saying it could never happen, and what is Christian nationalism, and there is no Church of America, and the closest thing that Americans have now to a Church of America is the church that the current president of America attends. And when a different president comes along, the Church of America would move to that church that president would be attending. So that's no good to anyone. See what the troll Yon God is saying. So he's saying, if you can make out the symbol, that the golden calf is very important for male mental health. Is that what you're saying? Is he saying idolatry is a good thing? But surely that is unrighteous. Idolaters, by definition, cannot be righteous Jews or Gentiles. In fact, we know from the Bible, we know from Genesis that they were, no, sorry, it was Exodus, wasn't it? That those who worship the golden calf were executed. I think there were, was it 3,000 of them? How many were executed? Let me look that up. So if you're going to take the whole Christian story seriously, you're going to have to avoid idolatry. If you're going to take the Abrahamic God and the afterlife seriously, you would have to avoid idolatry, right? The Jews, the Israelites, took idolatry so seriously, or at least Moses did, that 3,000 Israelites were executed for worshipping the golden calf. So, what were Christians doing worshipping Jesus? They worship idols of him and his mother, and they can't seem to see that it's idolatry. I guess they put it right out of their minds, as their ancestors did. But now they do not have the penalty of being burnt at the stake for denying the Trinity and not following the religion of their absolute Christian monarch. In fact, the institution of absolute monarchy is dead and gone and died in 1918. So, what would be the point of pretending to be Christian and risking the penalty of eternal damnation and endangering the repose of your immortal soul if you believe in that sort of thing? Do you believe in it or not? I don't think you know. I guess this pretext of claiming to be Christian is so ingrained and long-standing that I don't think the average person who goes to church even knows if they really believe in the afterlife. At its least, the whole practice of going to church is, well, it's somewhere to go on a Sunday and to be with like-minded people who are frightened about the politics of their country. Possibly. I don't know. I'm not a regular churchgoer. Or it could be just an attempt to cling to their white middle class identity, the weakening traditions of their parents and grandparents. It's because they're afraid. That's why people gather in numbers to their places of religious worship. It's because they see comfort in each other and think, oh, I'm not the only one. There are other frightened, doubtful people here too. And perhaps I can be at one with them, or even if I don't like them particularly, that they are at least people who share my feelings and my fears and my anxieties. But it's not going to change your politics, is it, Americans? Considering that the founding fathers quarantined the church from their state, it's not going to change your politics if you go to a different church on Sunday, or if you start going to church or synagogue or mosque. The only thing that would change the laws of your country would be through political means, and I guess you've given up on the idea of liberal democracy. Perhaps it's like a rotten wooden ladder that you prefer not to climb. And going to church is so much safer, or just staying at home and going, listening to Paul van der Klee. Now, what is he up to? What is he up to? I think he works Well, he is vaguely associated with Jordan Peterson. He speaks or he attends events that Jordan Peterson speaks at, and Jordan Peterson is ill. Again, what's wrong with him? But more than that, Jordan Peterson doesn't even have the conviction to state his beliefs. He won't even say whether he believes in God or not. Possibly his handlers tell him not to say whether he's a believer or not, because I imagine that if he were to start saying that he believes in God, then he would be asked if he was Christian. And if he were asked that, Jordan Peterson would be expected to defend the Trinity. And since, as all Christian theologians know, the Trinity is in fact morally and intellectually indefensible, that was why the ancestors of people who call themselves Christian now had to resort to burning heretics at the stake. So why don't they just give it up? It's actually causing harm if God exists. Isn't Jesus? Isn't it? It's actually roping all these confused white people into breaking the first and second commandments, or the first and, I should say, and the first and second Noahide laws forbidding idolatry and blasphemy, because Christianity actually compels the practice of idolatry and the committing of blasphemy, because every time a Christian says, Jesus lives, or Jesus is coming back, or Jesus loves you, they are actually blaspheming, because if you think Jesus is still alive, you must think he's immortal. If you think he's immortal, you must think he's divine, and bang, you are guilty of idolatry. So this is really the problem for Christians. And I'm sure if you did go to an Estuary meeting, you will not be able to discuss the Trinity, because Paul van der Klee, he's a clever man, and he already knows that the Trinity is morally and intellectually indefensible, and he doesn't want to talk about it. And we are not the kind of people who talk about the Trinity or question it. So, if you are one of these men who seek spiritual comfort in the estuary meetings of protocol of Paul van der Klee, and there are European versions of it, there's certainly London, British ones, designed to keep tabs on people who might be conscripted to some for some political end that the Americans have in store for Europeans. Yes, I think that's pretty clear. Possibly Paul van der Klee works for whoever Jordan Peterson works for. Jordan Peterson is the Pope of conservatism, and but conservatism is hopeless without a religion, and it's not possible, really, as Paul van der Klee says, to establish a Church of America. What would be the point? There would be an American wars of religion if that attempt were made. You know, the Catholics and the Protestants fighting each other. It could turn pretty bloody and ugly. The Europeans have already done it, so maybe they won't be doing anything like that. and getting precisely nowhere with it. They might even be the first to conclude that the only way to clear away the matriarchy, to shoo them off like chickens, would be to restore the patriarchy. What can you restore the patriarchy with? Obviously, you need a moral system that supports patriarchal moral values, and that must mean supporting the institutions of marriage and the family, and that must mean social conservatism, and that must mean supporting the practice of marriage, and that must mean the promotion of monogamy, and that must mean the criminalization of never married parents having illegitimate offspring without a marriage license. In America, you still call the marriage certificate the marriage license. In Britain, it's now called the marriage certificate and therefore associated with a worthless piece of paper. I think I've said all I need to say about estuary protocols and the purposes that it might be used for on credulous, earnest Islamophobes who know there's something deeply wrong with their morality, their society, and don't quite know what to do with it. Your God asks me to deal with the Chinese. What would be an easier way of getting China to accept secular Quranism with Chinese characteristics than if America and the rest of the West were to adopt it? So here is the bargain. If America adopts it, and it should be the first country to adopt it, because when it does so, the rest of Europe and Australasia will adopt it too. They will follow in your wake, the, because they are but the vassal states of America. So if America were to adopt it, countries like India, like Russia, like China, they will have to take it seriously too, won't they? And then everyone can have a new world order that promotes patriarchal values and is able to comprehensively remove the matriarchy from their society. How about that? Yon God. Thank you for your praise. I hope you will tell your three-letter agency bosses what my marketing angle is. I'd like to think that I have anticipated all the problems that people are only just thinking of. I have had plenty of time after all. So thank you for coming and listening, and most of all, understanding what I'm telling you.